This week's project, we're gonna get into faces. So for the project, you are going to get a half a face and you're gonna fill in the other half. But this is a great way to get introduced to drawing faces without the pressure of trying to actually take somebody you know or yourself and try to make that look real. So this is actually a really great way to figure out how to do modeling of light and shadow and proportions and placement and everything. You are going to find a picture of a person looking straight into the camera. It's harder to find than you think. Otherwise, if you can find it, if you happen to have magazines laying around, if you have a printer at home. So here's an example. We photocopied it to make it black and white and then cut right down the middle. One word of advice, when you cut it in half, you have to be really careful. You might want to take a ruler or a straight edge and figure out where the middle is and then almost like draw a line for you to follow and cut. A couple of things to look for is right in between your brow, like in between your eyebrows, where does your nose actually come to kind of like a center, and then on your lip in between, like the little bit in between here is where you can kind of line up those points. But this is a good example. And what you're looking for is something that doesn't have really, really dark and really, really light areas. So this is an example of the project, a completed one that somebody left here. So we'll kind of talk through what works and what doesn't work on a few of these. And then I'm going to give you examples of some magazine pictures of what to look for, what not to look for. You can see on this one, it looks good. It's a successful project. Some parts work better than others. When you look at it, kind of farther away, you can see a few things, like, maybe the eyebrow is a little too heavy on this side. You can also see that the shading doesn't totally match up. This is a little bit lighter than this. So as you're shading, the thing to think about, and we'll get into this in the demo in a minute, but even, when you photocopy it, even if your skin is lighter in tone, it's not as white as the paper, okay? If you look at this, the only white parts really are in the eye and then the highlights. Everything else should be shaded, and they do this. Maybe it needs to be just a tad bit more. Another example. Don't worry, this is actually a pretty good example. This one's a pretty successful project. Your goal is to make it hard to tell which is the original and which is the drawing part. You should match up. So you can see, especially here on the nose, notice how there's a little bit of highlight under the nose, the way they lit this for the photograph, and the student did that and mimicked that. This part is pretty much exact in terms of the shading. Maybe a little bit more highlight on the lip, but that's getting really, really picky. You can see that this is pretty much the same shading, so they matched it up exactly. You can tell this side, there's not a lot of white except where it's highlighted, so maybe right there. And even in the eye, it's not 100% pure white. It's shaded right there. You kind of see that close up? Because the original doesn't have that either. It's pretty light on the outside. So this is a pretty successful one, okay? Most people's don't look 100% like this one. So let's talk through a few others. This one, same thing, it's pretty successful, but the shading is almost too even, in a sense. It needs a little bit more of like sculpting of the shadow and highlight. Doesn't totally match up. So I'm going to talk you through how to start this, the best approach. But first, let's talk through what kind of photo you're looking for. Okay, so this is a good example. Aaron Rodgers, he's looking straight, but his head is slightly tilted, so the picture's actually cut at a bit of an angle, which is okay, as long as you can see the whole face evenly. If it's a little bit tilted, you cannot use it. You're looking to cut right through the middle of this. You're also looking to make sure there's not too much light and too much dark. Can you see all the creases? You can see all of his wrinkles as he's smiling. Don't be afraid of facial hair. It's not that hard. Don't worry about, all this stuff. But can you see light and shadow? Can you see the details? Somebody like this that has some character to their face, let's say, is actually easier than perfectly smooth, flawless skin. As we come back to this one thing to notice is if you happen to be going through magazines looking for photos, women, they get made up more and they get photoshopped more. Just that's how our society is. They brush away wrinkles. So see this, her skin is, kind of flawless. It's a, L'Oreal ad. So the original one, there's not a lot of information there. There's not a lot to actually include on some of these. So that's why else, this project isn't maybe quite as successful, is partly, because it needs to be a little bit darker values, but because this is so almost flat to start with, there's no wrinkles, there's nothing. There's not as much to draw and to create depth with. If you can find a photo of a woman, great, but typically the ones of men work out better. So same thing here. Like this one didn't include his whole face, but that's okay because I only need half. Is there too much light or shadow, or can I see all the details? Yes. All right, Chris Paul, is there enough? This is a little bit dark, right? Can you see information in his eyes, or is it kind of going all to dark, dark, dark? And are you losing information because it's so blown out on that highlight on the outsides? So this still could probably work, but beware because this part is really dark and it's going to become really flat as you shade it. Would this one work? This is a great photo, but I would not use this side because the way they shot it, with that light coming through. But could you do this side? Absolutely. I have all this information. See the difference? His shadow by his eye, I can still see the details and the information. I can see light and dark shadows. So the light and dark shadows still are kind of make his skin look like that. Versus on Chris Paul here, that just fades into all a dark, dark shadow. It has nothing to do with skin color because all of these, you're looking for highlight and shadow. You're not coloring the color of the skin. Suarez, good example. You can see a lot. There's not a lot of shading, but that one would work. Natalie Portman, same thing we were talking about. Perfect skin, airbrushed out on wrinkles and things like that, right? And then the photographic technique, this is kind of going to really shallow depth of field. This is getting blurry. So this part's in focus, but then everything starts fading, even on her cheekbone. So that would be a little hard. This one, there's not a lot of shadow and highlight just because it's very evenly lit, but doesn't work great for the example. What about this guy? This is a great photograph. He's got lots to work with. Lots of light and shadow, lots of details. All right, Will Smith. This is Will Smith, probably this photograph is probably older than some of you guys. I've had some of these photos for a while. This is from 2006. Some of these guys are still relevant 15, 14 years later. All right, can you do this? Sure, you have to do that. You have to ignore any letters. Don't worry about any of that. But in terms of highlight and shadow, and being able to create shape and volume, this has great potential to use, okay? DiCaprio, Stallone, Stiller, they're all making movies 14 years later. All right, so real quickly, I'm gonna show you how to start. You're gonna take your picture, cut it in half, glue it down on the paper, glue it down to where you have enough room to draw the other half. Don't glue it so close to the side that you wouldn't actually have enough room. Make sure you have plenty of room. So this is one that I've started. I'm going to show you basically how I kind of get going on this. So this is glued down. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Do you see all of these little marks here? I've used this a few times. This is some of the marks are getting a little too big. They wouldn't be quite so noticeable, but got to make sure you can see those. Those are what I call landmarks. Basically, as I'm transferring information before I start drawing, I need to know where everything is. So for me, it's easier to actually do this upside down. But if I'm trying to draw eyes, where is the inside of the eye in relation to the midpoint? So I put the point of my pencil there, and I put my fingernail right here. So I get this measurement from my fingernail to the tip, and then I transfer it. So my fingernail is in the midpoint, the tip goes there. So that's where I know my inside part of my eye is going to start right there. Same thing, how far away is the outside? Transfer it over, and that's what that dot is. So I can make as many of these little dots as I want to. For inside of the eye, outside of the eye, outside of this shaded part, maybe I want to go to where the eyelid kind of stops. Look at the jawline. His jawline and hairline, it kind of swoops and swoops out where he's got that jawbone. So maybe I want to know how far out the farthest part is here. Measure that, transfer it. That's what that dot is right there. It goes in. Maybe I want to know where this part of the jaw where that angle part is. Same thing, I'm going to get that measurement, popped out there. The only reason I'm doing this upside down is because I'm right-handed. My paper is on this side. So for me, when I do this, I get my measurement, and then if I do that, I just drop the pencil down, and it makes the point. So it's a really kind of quick and efficient way. If you want to use a ruler, you can. You can do whichever method you want to. If you want to just do it here, you know, get this. But see, then my thumb is here, so then I have to put this down, and then I have to make the point. So by doing it this way, it's just a little more efficient. So these marks, inside of the mouth, kind of the outside of the mouth, chin, jawline, edge of the nose, all of that. So that's what all those points are. Once you get going, then you start sketching out the actual shape of it. So I had to start sketching out the actual shape of the eye, and then shading and all of that. So you can kind of see a little bit right in here. This is a little example of how this gets going. You can kind of see just the shading is matched up so that this is the same amount of shading. So the nose is the beginning of that. Same with the mouth, matching that up. I've got another one in progress here. So when you look at the beginning, see how there's like a highlight over the lip, and then start doing the lip. There's a little bit of a highlight here, so that little highlight is there. You know, there's more to be shaded, but you can see the beginning part. But notice how this isn't staying white. I don't care if this person has really light skin, really dark skin. I'm looking at light and shadow. Even if it's somebody who has got really dark skin, you still should see in their photograph, you still should be able to see light and shadow, irregardless, right? Like we said, in here, we can see highlight, shadow, highlight, shadow. So you're not looking at skin tone, you're looking at light and shadow for the project. You're gonna do that. Your end result is finishing it. Do your best on the hair. If you see an ear, you need to do it. And see how this is part of the clothes. As long as you kind of finish out the neck and just a little bit like this, you don't have to finish the whole part if you don't want to. It's the same on this one. You need to give them a neck and finish out like, you know, even if it's just simple like that. Okay?